Stories of Futures Past presents 5 stories featuring predictions coming true. Cost of Living by Robert Sheckley. An Ounce of Cure by Alan E. Nourse. A Bottle of Old Wine by Richard O. Lewis. Shatter the Wall by Sidney Van Scyoc. Parking Unlimited by Noel M. Loomis.
Cost of Living by Robert Sheckley, originally published in Galaxy Science Fiction, December 1952. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Karen decided that he could trace his present mood to Miller's suicide last week, but the knowledge didn't help him get rid of the vague, formless fear in the back of his mind. It was foolish. Miller's suicide didn't concern him. But why had that fat, jovial man killed himself? Miller had had everything to live for: wife, kids, good job, and all the marvellous luxuries of the age. Why had he done it? "Good morning, dear," Karen's wife said as he sat down at the breakfast table. "Morning, honey. Morning, Billy." His son grunted something. You just couldn't tell about people, Karen decided, and dialed his breakfast. The meal was gracefully prepared and served by the new Avignon electric auto cook. His mood persisted, annoyingly enough, since Karen wanted to be in the top form this morning. It was his day off, and the Avignon electric finance man was coming. This was an important day. He walked to the door with his son. "Have a good day, Billy." His son nodded, shifted his books, and started to school without answering. Karen wondered if something was bothering him too. He hoped not. One worry in the family was plenty. "See you later, honey." He kissed his wife as she left to go shopping. At any rate, he thought, watching her go down the walk, at least she's happy. He wondered how much she'd spend at the AE store. Checking his watch, he found that he had half an hour before the AE finance man was due. The best way to get rid of a bad mood was to drown it, he told himself, and headed for the shower. The shower room was a glittering plastic wonder, and the sheer luxury of it eased Karen's mind. He threw his clothes into the AE automatic clean presser and adjusted the shower spray to a notch above brisk. The 5 degrees above skin temperature water beat against his thin white body. Delightful. And then a relaxing rub dry in the AE auto towel. Wonderful, he thought, as the towel stretched and kneaded his stringy muscles. And it should be wonderful, he reminded himself. The AE auto towel with shaving attachments had cost $313 plus tax. But worth every penny of it, he decided, as the AE shaver came out of a corner and whisked off his rudimentary stubble. After all, what good was life if you couldn't enjoy the luxuries? His skin tingled when he switched off the auto towel. He should have been feeling wonderful, but he wasn't. Miller's suicide kept nagging at his mind, destroying the peace of his day off. Was there anything else bothering him? Certainly there was nothing wrong with the house. His papers were in order for the finance man. "Have I forgotten something?" he asked out loud. "The Avignon electric finance man will be here in 15 minutes, his AE bathroom wall reminder whispered. "I know that. Is there anything else?" The wall reminder wheeled off its memorized data, a vast amount of minutiae about watering the lawn, having the jet lash checked, buying lamb chops for Monday, and the like. Things he still hadn't found time for. All right, that's enough. He allowed the AE autodresser to dress him, skillfully draping a new selection of fabrics over his bony frame. A whiff of fashionable masculine perfume finished him, and he went into the living room, threading his way between the appliances that lined the walls. A quick inspection of the dials on the wall assured him that the house was in order. The breakfast dishes had been sanitized and stacked. The house had been cleaned, dusted, polished. His wife's garments had been hung up. His son's model rocket ships had been put back in the closet. "Stop worrying, you hypochondriac," he told himself angrily. The door announced, "Mr. Parthis from Avignon Finance is here." Karen started to tell the door to open when he noticed the automatic bartender. Good God, why hadn't he thought of it? The automatic bartender was manufactured by Castile Motors. He had bought it at a weak moment. AE wouldn't think very highly of that, since they sold their own brand. He wheeled the bartender into the kitchen and told the doors to open. "A very good day to you, sir," Mr. Parthis said. Parthis was a tall, imposing man, dressed in a conservative tweed drape. His eyes had the crinkled corners of a man who laughs frequently. He beamed broadly and shook Karen's hand, looking around the crowded living room. "A beautiful place you have here, sir. Beautiful. As a matter of fact, I don't think I'll be overstepping the company's code to inform you that yours is the nicest interior in this section." Karen felt a sudden glow of pride at that, thinking of the rows of identical houses on this block and the next, and the one after that. "Now then, is everything functioning properly?" Mr. Pathin asked, setting his briefcase on a chair. "Everything in order?" "Oh, yes," Karen said enthusiastically. "Avignon Electric never goes out of whack." "The phone all right? Changes records for the full 17 hours?" "It certainly does," Karen said. He hadn't had a chance to try out the phone, but it was a beautiful piece of furniture. "The Solido projector all right? Enjoying the programs?" Absolutely perfect reception. He had watched a program just last month, and it had been startlingly lifelike. "How about the kitchen? Auto cook in order? Recipe master still knocking him out?" "Marvellous stuff, simply marvellous." Mr. Parthis went on to inquire about his refrigerator, his vacuum cleaner, his car, his helicopter, his subterranean swimming pool, and the hundreds of other items Karen had bought from Avignon Electric. "Everything is swell," Karen said, a trifle untruthfully since he hadn't unpacked every item yet. "Just wonderful." "I'm so glad," Mr. Parthis said, leaning back with a sigh of relief. "You have no idea how hard we try to satisfy our customers. If a product isn't right, back it comes, no questions asked. We believe in pleasing our customers." "I certainly appreciate it, Mr. Parthis." Karen hoped the AE man wouldn't ask to see the kitchen. He visualized the Castile Motors bartender in there like a porcupine in a dog show. "I'm proud to say that most of the people in this neighborhood buy from us," Mr. Parthis was saying. "We're a solid firm." "Was Mr. Miller a customer of yours?" Karen asked. "That fellow who killed himself?" Parthis frowned briefly. "He was, as a matter of fact. That amazed me, sir, absolutely amazed me. Why, just last month the fellow bought a brand new jetlash from me, capable of doing 350 miles an hour on a straightaway. He was as happy as a kid over it, and then to go and do a thing like that. Of course, the jetlash brought up his debt a little." "Of course." "But what did that matter? He had every luxury in the world, and then he went and hung himself." "Hung himself?" "Yes," Parthis said, the frown coming back. "Every modern convenience in his house, and he hung himself with a piece of rope. Probably unbalanced for a long time." The frown slid off his face, and the customary smile replaced it. "But enough of that. Let's talk about you." The smile widened as Parthis opened his briefcase. "Now then, your account. You owe us $203,000.29, Mr. Karen, as of your last purchase, right?" "Right," Karen said, remembering the amount from his own papers. "Here's my installment." He handed Parthis an envelope, which the man checked and put in his pocket. "Fine. Now you know, Mr. Karen, that you won't live long enough to pay us the full 200,000, don't you?" "No, I don't suppose I will," Karen said soberly. He was only 39, with a full 100 years of life before him, thanks to the marvels of medical science. But at a salary of 3,000 a year, he still couldn't pay it all off and have enough to support a family on at the same time. "Of course, we would not want to deprive you of necessities, which in any case is fully protected by the laws we helped formulate and pass, to say nothing of the terrific items that are coming out next year, things you wouldn't want to miss, sir." Mr. Karen nodded. Certainly he wanted new items. "Well, suppose we make the customary arrangement. If you will just sign over your son's earnings for the first 30 years of his adult life, we can easily arrange credit for you." Mr. Parthis whipped the papers out of his briefcase and spread them in front of Karen. "If you'll just sign here, sir." "Well," Karen said, "I'm not sure. I'd like to give the boy a start in life, not saddle him with—" "But, my dear sir," Parthis interposed, "this is for your son as well. He lives here, doesn't he? He has a right to enjoy the luxuries, the marvels of science." "Sure," Karen said, "only—" "Why, sir, today the average man is living like a king. 100 years ago the richest man in the world couldn't buy what any ordinary citizen possesses at present. You mustn't look upon it as a debt. It's an investment." "That's true," Karen said dubiously. He thought about his son and his rocket ship models, his star charts, his maps. Would it be right? He asked himself. "What's wrong?" Parthis asked cheerfully. "Well, I was just wondering," Karen said. "Signing over my son's earnings? You don't think I'm getting in a little too deep, do you?" "Too deep? My dear sir!" Parthis exploded into laughter. "Do you know Mellon down the block? Well, don't say I said it, but he's already mortgaged his grandchildren's salary for their full life expectancy, and he doesn't have half the goods he's made up his mind to own. We'll work out something for him. Service to the customer is our job, and we know it well." Karen wavered visibly. "And after you're gone, sir, they'll all belong to your son." That was true, Karen thought. His son would have all the marvellous things that filled the house, and after all, it was only 30 years out of a life expectancy of 150. He signed with a flourish. "Excellent," Parthis said. "And by the way, has your home got an AE master operator?" It hadn't. Parthis explained that a master operator was a new this year, a stupendous advance in scientific engineering. It was designed to take over all the functions of house cleaning and cooking without its owner having to lift a finger. Instead of running around all day pushing half a dozen different buttons, with the master operator all you have to do is push one, a remarkable achievement. Since it was only $535, Karen signed for one, having it added to his son's debt. Right, he thought, walking Parthis to the door. This house will be Billy's some day, his and his wife's. They certainly will want everything up to date. Just one button, he thought. That would be a time-saver. After Parthis left, Karen sat back in an adjustable chair and turned on the Solido. After twisting the easy dial, he discovered that there was nothing he wanted to see. He tilted back the chair and took a nap. The something on his mind was still bothering him. "Hello, darling." He awoke to find his wife was home. She kissed him on the ear. "Look." She had bought an AE sexitizer negligee. He was pleasantly surprised that was all she had bought. Usually, Leela returned from shopping laden down. "It's lovely," he said. She bent over for a kiss, then giggled, a habit she knew she had picked up from the latest popular Solida star. He wished she hadn't. "Going to dial supper," she said, and went to the kitchen. Karen smiled, thinking that soon she would be able to dial the meals without moving out of the living room. He settled back in his chair, and his son walked in. "How's it going, son?" he asked heartily. "All right," Billy answered listlessly. "What's the matter, son?" The boy stared at his feet, not answering. "Come on, tell Dad what's the trouble." Billy sat down on a packing case and put his chin in his hands. He looked thoughtfully at his father. "Dad, could I be a master repairman if I wanted to be?" Mr. Karen smiled at the question. Billy alternated between wanting to be a master repairman and a rocket pilot. The repairmen were the elite. It was their job to fix the automatic repair machines. The repair machines could fix just about anything, but you couldn't have a machine fix the machine that fixed the machine. That was where the master repairman came in. But it was a highly competitive field, and only a very few of the best brains were able to get their degrees, and although the boy was bright, he didn't seem to have an engineering bent. "It's possible, son. Anything is possible." "But is it possible for me?" I don't know, Karen answered, as honestly as he could. Well, I don't want to be a Mars repairman anyway, the boy said, seeing that the answer was no. I want to be a space pilot. A space pilot, Billy? Leela asked, coming into the room. But there aren't any. Yes, there are, Billy argued. We were told in school that the government is going to send some men to Mars. They've been saying that for 100 years, Karen said, and they still haven't gotten around to doing it. They will this time. Why would you want to go to Mars? Leela asked, winking at Karen. There are no pretty girls on Mars. I'm not interested in girls. I just want to go to Mars. You wouldn't like it, honey, Leela said. It's a nasty old place with no air. It's got some air. I'd like to go there, the boy insisted sullenly. I don't like it here. What's that? Karen asked, sitting up straight. Is there anything you haven't got? Anything you want? No, sir, I've got everything I want. Whenever his son called him sir, Karen knew that something was wrong. Look, son, when I was your age, I wanted to go to Mars too. I wanted to do romantic things. I even wanted to be a master repairman. Then why didn't you? Well, I grew up. I realized that there were more important things. First I had to pay off the debt my father had left me, and then I met your mother, Leela giggled. And I wanted a home of my own. It'll be the same with you. You'll pay off your debt and get married, the same as the rest of us. Billy was silent for a while. Then he brushed his dark hair, straight like his father's, back from his forehead and wet his lips. How come I have debts, sir? Karen explained carefully about the things a family needed for civilized living and the cost of those items, how they had to be paid, how it was customary for a son to take on a part of his parents' debt when he came of age. Billy's silence annoyed him. It was almost as if the boy were reproaching him. After he had slaved for years to give the ungrateful whelp every luxury. Son, he said harshly, have you studied history in school? Good. Then you know how it was in the past. Wars. How would you like to get blown up in a war? The boy didn't answer. Or how would you like to break your back for 8 hours a day doing work a machine should handle? Or be hungry all the time? Or cold with the rain beating down on you and no place to sleep? He paused for a response, got none, and went on. You live in the most fortunate age mankind has ever known. You are surrounded by every wonder of art and science, the finest music, the greatest books in art, all at your fingertips. All you have to do is push a button. He shifted to a kindlier tone. Well, what are you thinking? I was just wondering how I could go to Mars, the boy said. With a debt, I mean. I don't suppose I could get away from that. Of course not. Unless I stowed away on a rocket. But you wouldn't do that. No, of course not, the boy said, but his tone lacked conviction. You'll stay here and marry a very nice girl, Leela told him. Sure I will, Billy said. Sure. He grinned suddenly. I didn't mean any of that stuff about going to Mars. I really didn't. I'm glad of that, Leela answered. Just forget I mentioned it, Billy said, smiling stiffly. He stood up and raced upstairs. Probably gone to play with his rockets, Leela said. He's such a little devil. The Karens ate a quiet supper, and then it was time for Mr. Karen to go to work. He was on night shift this month. He kissed his wife goodbye, climbed into his jet lash, and roared to the factory. The automatic gates recognized him and opened. He parked and walked in. Automatic lathes, automatic presses, everything was automatic. The factory was huge and bright, and the machines hummed softly to themselves, doing their job and doing it well. Karen walked to the end of the automatic washing machine assembly line to relieve the man there. Everything all right? He asked. Sure, the man said. Haven't had a bad one all year. These new models here have built-in voices. They don't light up like the old ones. Karen sat down where the man had sat and waited for the first washing machine to come through. His job was the soul of simplicity. He just sat there, and the machines went by him. He pressed a button on them and found out if they were all right. They always were. After passing him, the washing machines went to the packaging section. The first one slid by on the long slide of rollers. He pressed the starting button on the side. "Ready for the wash," the washing machine said. Karen pressed the release and let it go by. That boy of his, Karen thought. Would he grow up and face his responsibilities? Would he mature and take his place in society? Karen doubted it. The boy was a born rebel. If anyone got to Mars, it would be his kid. But the thought didn't especially disturb him. "Ready for the wash," another machine went by. Karen remembered something about Miller. The jovial man had always been talking about the planets, always kidding about going off somewhere and roughing it. He hadn't, though. He'd committed suicide. "Ready for the wash." Karen had 8 hours in front of him, and he loosened his belt to prepare for it. 8 hours of pushing buttons and listening to a machine announce its readiness. "Ready for the wash." He pressed the release. "Ready for the wash." Karen's mind strayed from the job, which didn't need much attention in any case. He wished he had done what he had longed to do as a youngster. It would have been great to be a rocket pilot, to push a button and go to Mars.
The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story. An Ounce of Cure by Alan Edward Nourse, originally published in the 1963 collection The Counterfeit Man, More Science Fiction Stories by Alan E. Nourse. Narrated by Tom Trussel. The doctor's office was shiny and modern. Behind the desk, the doctor smiled down at James Wheatley through thick glasses. "Now then, what seems to be the trouble?" Wheatley had been palpitating for 5 days straight at the prospect of coming here. "I know it's silly," he said, "but I've been having a pain in my toe." "Indeed," said the doctor. "Well now, how long have you had this pain, my man?" "About 6 months now, I'd say. Just now and then, you know. It's never really been bad. Until last week, you see—" "I see," said the doctor. "Getting worse all the time, you say?" Wheatley wiggled the painful toe reflectively. "Well, you might say that. You see, when I first—" "How old did you say you were, Mr. Wheatley?" 55. 55. The doctor leafed through the medical record on his desk. "But this is incredible. You haven't had a checkup in almost 10 years. "I guess I haven't," said Wheatley apologetically. "I've been feeling pretty well until—" "Feeling well?" The doctor stared in horror. "But, my dear fellow, no checkup since January 1963. We aren't in the Middle Ages, you know. This is 1972. "Well, of course. Of course, you may well be feeling well enough, but that doesn't mean everything is just the way it should be. And now, you see, you're having pains in your toes." "One toe," said Wheatley. "The little one on the right. It seemed to me—" "One toe today, perhaps," said the doctor heavily, "but tomorrow—" He heaved a sigh. "How about your breathing lately? Been growing short of breath when you hurry upstairs?" "Well, I have been bothered a little." "I thought so. Heart pound when you run for the subway? Feel tired all day? Pains in your calves when you walk fast?" Yes, occasionally. Wheatley looked worried and rubbed his toe on the chair leg. "You know that 55 is a dangerous age," said the doctor gravely. "Do you have a cough? Heartburn after dinner? Prop up on pillows at night? Just as I thought. And no check-up for 10 years. He sighed again. "I suppose I should have seen to it," Wheatley admitted. "But you see, it's just that my toe—" "My dear fellow, your toe is part of you. It doesn't just exist down there all by itself. If your toe hurts, there must be a reason." Wheatley looked more worried than ever. "There must? I thought perhaps you could just give me a little something—" "To stop the pain?" The doctor looked shocked. "Well, of course, I could do that, but that's not getting at the root of the trouble, is it? That's just treating symptoms. Medieval quackery. Medicine has advanced a long way since your last checkup, my friend, and even treatment has its dangers. Did you know that more people died last year of aspirin poisoning than of cyanide poisoning? Wheatley wiped his forehead. Dear me, I never realized. You have to think about those things, said the doctor. Now, the problem here is to find out why you have the pain in your toe. It could be inflammatory, maybe a tumour. Perhaps it could be functional, or maybe vascular. Perhaps you could take my blood pressure or something, Wheatley offered. Well, of course I could, but that isn't really my field, you know. It wouldn't really mean anything if I did it, and there's nothing to worry about. We have fine hypertensive man at the diagnostic clinic. The doctor checked the appointment book on his desk. Now, if we could see you there next Monday morning at 9. Very interesting x-rays, said the young doctor with the red hair. Very interesting. See this shadow in the duodenal cap? See the prolonged emptying time? And I've never seen such a beautiful pylorospasm. This is my toe? Asked Wheatley, edging toward the doctor's. It seemed he had been waiting for a very long time. Toe? Oh, no, said the red-headed doctor. No, that's the orthopedic radiologist's job. I am a gastrointestinal man myself. Upper. Dr. Schultz here is lower. The red-headed doctor turned back to his consultation with Dr. Schultz. Mr. Wheatley rubbed his toe and waited. Presently another doctor came by. He looked very grave as he sat down beside Wheatley. Tell me, Mr. Wheatley, have you had an orthodiagram recently? No. An EKG? No. Fluoroortogram? I don't think so. The doctor looked even graver and walked away, muttering to himself. In a few moments he came back with 2 more doctors. No question in my mind that is cardiomegaly, he was saying, but the Haddonfield should know. He's best left ventricle man in the city. Excellent paper in the AMA journal last July. The inadequacies of modern orthodogrammatic techniques in demonstrating minimal left ventricular hypertrophy. A brilliant study, simply brilliant. Now this patient, he glanced toward Wheatley, and his voice dropped to a mumble. Presently 2 other men nodded, and one walked over to Wheatley, cautiously, as though afraid he might suddenly vanish. Now there's nothing to be worried about, Mr. Wheatley, he said. We're going to have you fixed up in just no time at all. Just a few more studies. Now if you could see me in the valve clinic tomorrow afternoon at 3. Wheatley nodded. Nothing serious, I hope. Serious? Oh, no, dear me, you mustn't worry. Everything is going to be all right, the doctor said. Well, that is, my toe is still bothering me some. It's not nearly as bad, but I wondered if maybe you... Dawn broke on the doctor's face. Give you something for it? Well, now, we aren't therapeutic men, you understand. Always best to let the expert handle the problem in his own field. He paused, stroking his chin for a moment. Tell you what we'll do. Dr. Epstein is one of the finest therapeutic men in the city. He could take care of you in a jiffy. We'll see if we can't arrange an appointment with him after you've seen me tomorrow. Mr. Wheatley was late to mitral valve clinic the next day because he had gone to aortic valve clinic by mistake, but finally he found the right waiting room. A few hours later he was being thumped, photographed, and listened to. Substances were popped into his right arm and withdrawn from his left arm as he marvelled at the brilliance of modern medical techniques. Before they were finished, he had seen by both the mitral man and the aortic man, as well as the gate arteries man and the peripheral capillary bed man. The therapeutic man happened to be in Atlantic City at a convention, and the rheumatologist was on vacation, so Wheatley was sent to functional clinic instead. Always have to rule out these things, the doctors agreed. Wouldn't do much good to give you medicine if your trouble isn't organic now, would it? The psychoneuroticist studies his sex life, while the psychosociologist examined his social milieu. Then they conferred for a long time. 3 days later he was waiting in the hallway downstairs again. Heads met in a huddle. Words and phrases slipped out from time to time as the discussion grew heated. No doubt in my mind that it's a... But we can't ignore the endocrine implications, Doctor. You're perfectly right there, of course. Bittenbender at the university might be able to answer the question. No better pituitary osmoreceptorologist in the city. A tubular function man should look at those kidneys first. He's 55, you know. Has anyone studied his filtration fraction? Might be a peripheral vascular spasticity factor. After a while, James Wheatley rose from the bench and slipped out the door, limping slightly as he went. The room was small and dusky, with heavy Turkish drapes obscuring the dark hallway beyond. A suggestion of incense hung in the air. In due course, a gaunt, swarthy man in moustache and turban appeared through the curtains and bowed solemnly. "You come with a problem?" he asked in a slight accent. "As a matter of fact, yes," James Wheatley said hesitantly. "You see, I've been having a pain in my right little toe."
The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story.
A Bottle of Old Wine by Richard O. Lewis, originally published in If, Worlds of Science Fiction, July 1953. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Herbert Hyrule settled himself more comfortably in his easy chair, extended his short legs further toward the fireplace, and let his eyes travel cautiously in the general direction of his wife. She was in her chair as usual, her long legs curled up beneath her, the upper half of her face hidden in the bulk of a personalized three-dimensional televis. The televis, of a stereoscopic nature, seemingly brought the performers with all their tinsel and colour directly into the room of the watcher. Hyrule had no way of seeing into the plastic affair she wore, but he guessed from the expression on the lower half of her face that she was watching one of the newer black-marked sex operas. In any event, there would be no sound, movement, or sign of life from her for the next 3 hours. To break the thread of the play for even a moment would ruin all the previous emotional build-up. There had been a time when he hated her for those long and silent evenings, lonely hours during which he was completely ignored. It was different now, however, for those hours furnished him with time for an escape of his own. His lips curled into a tight smile, and his right hand fondled the unobtrusive switch beneath his trouser leg. He did not press the switch. He would wait a few minutes longer. But it was comforting to know that it was there, exhilarating to know that he could escape for a few hours by a mere flick of his finger. He let his eyes stray to the dim light of the artificial flames in the fireplace. His hate for her was not bounded merely by those lonely hours she had forced upon him. No, it was far more encompassing. He hated her with a deep, burning savagery that was deadly in its passion. He hated her for her money, the money she kept securely from him. He hated her for the paltry allowance she doled out to him, as if he were an irresponsible child. It was as if she were constantly reminding him in every glance and gesture, "I made a bad bargain when I married you. You wanted me, my money, everything, and had nothing to give in return except your own doltish self. You set a trap for me, baited with lies and a false front. Now you are caught in your own trap, and will remain there like a mouse to eat from my hand whatever crumbs I stoop to give you." But some day his hate would be appeased. Yes, some day soon he would kill her. He shot a sideway glance at her, wondering if by chance she suspected. She hadn't moved. Her lips were pouted into a half-smile. The sex opera had probably reached one of its more pleasurable moments. Hyrule let his eyes shift back to the fireplace again. Yes, he would kill her. Then he would claim a rightful share of her money, be rid of her debasing dominance. He let the thought run around through his head, savouring it with mental taste buds. He would not kill her tonight. No, nor the next night. He would wait until he had sucked the last measure of pleasure from the thought. It was like having a bottle of rare old wine on a shelf where it could be viewed daily. It was like being able to pause again and again before the bottle, hold it up to the light, and say to it, "Some day, when my desire for you has reached the ultimate, I shall unstopper you quietly and sip you slowly to the last soul-satisfying drop." As long as the bottle remained there upon the shelf, it was symbolic of that pleasurable moment. He snapped out of his reverie and realized he had been wasting precious moments. There would be time enough tomorrow for gloating. Tonight there were other things to do, pleasurable things. He remembered the girl he had met the night before and smiled smugly. Perhaps she would be awaiting him even now. If not, there would be another one. He settled himself deeper into the chair, glanced once more at his wife, then let his head lean comfortably back against the chair's headrest. His hand upon his thigh felt the thin mesh that cloaked his body beneath his clothing like a sheer stocking. His fingers went again to the tiny switch. Again he hesitated. Herbert Hyrule knew no more about the teleporter suit he wore than he did about the radio in the corner, the TV set against the wall, or the personalized televis his wife was wearing. You pressed one of the buttons on the radio. Music came out. You pressed a button and clicked a dial on the TV. Music and pictures came out. You pressed a button and made an adjustment on the televis. Three-dimensional, emotion-coloured pictures leaped into the room. You pressed a tiny switch on the teleporter suit. You were whisked away to a receiving set you had previously set up in secret. He knew that the music and the images of the performance on the TV and televis were brought to his room by some form of electrical impulse or wave, while the actual musicians and performers remained in the studio. He knew that when he pressed the switch on his thigh, something within him, his ectoplasm, higher self, the thing spirits use for materialization, whatever its real name, streamed out of him along an invisible channel, leaving his body behind in the chair in a conscious but dreamlike state. His other self materialized in a small cabin in a hidden nook between a highway and a river, where he had installed the receiving set a month ago. He thought once more of the girl who might be waiting for him, smiled, and pressed the switch. The dank air of the cabin was chill to Herbert Hyrule's naked flesh. He fumbled through the darkness for the clothing he kept there, found his shorts and trousers, got hurriedly into them, then flicked on a pocket lighter and ignited a stub of candle upon the table. By the wavering light, he finished dressing in the black satin clothing, the white shirt, the flowing necktie and tam. He invoiced the contents of his billfold. Not much, and his monthly pittance was still 2 weeks away. He had skimped for 6 months to salvage enough money from his allowance to make a down payment on the teleporter suit. Since then, his expenses, monthly payments for the suit, cabin rent, costly liquor, had forced him to place his nights of escape on strict ration. He could not go on this way, he realized. Not now. Not since he had met the girl. He had to have more money. Perhaps he could not afford the luxury of leaving the wine bottle longer upon the shelf. Riverside Club, where Hyrule arrived by bus and 100 yards of walking, was exclusive. It catered to a clientele that had but 3 things in common: money, a desire for utter self-abandonment, and a sales slip indicating ownership of a teleporter suit. The club was of necessity expensive, for self-teleportation was strictly illegal, and police protection came high. Herbert Hyrule adjusted his white silken mask carefully at the door, and shoved his sales slip through a small aperture where it was thoroughly scanned by unseen eyes. A buzzer sounded an instant later, the lock on the door clicked, and Hyrule pushed through into the exhilarating warmth of music and laughter. The main room was large. Hidden lights along the walls sent slow beams of red, blue, vermilion, green, yellow, and pink trailing across the domed ceiling in a heterogeneous pattern. The coloured beams mingled, diffused, spread, were caught up by mirrors of various tints which diffused and mingled the lights once more until the whole effect was an ever-changing panorama of softly melting shades. The gay and bizarre costumes of the masked revellers on the dance floor and at the tables, unearthly in themselves, were made even more so by the altering light. Music flooded the room from unseen sources. Laughter, hysterical, drunken, filled with utter abandonment, came from the dance floor, the tables, and the private booths and rooms hidden cleverly within the walls. Hyrule pushed himself to an unoccupied table, sat down, and ordered a bottle of cheap whisky. He would have preferred champagne, but his depleted finances forbade the more discriminate taste. When his order arrived, he poured a glass tumbler half full and consumed it eagerly while his eyes scanned the room in search of the girl. He couldn't see her in the dim swirl of colour. Had she arrived? Perhaps she was wearing a different costume than she had the night before. If so, recognition might prove difficult. He poured himself another drink, promising himself he would go in search of her when the liquor began to take effect. A woman clad in the revealing garb of a Persian dancer threw an arm about him from behind and kissed him on the cheek through the veil which covered the lower part of her face. "Hi, honey," she giggled into his ears. "Having a time?" He reached for the white arm to pull her to him, but she eluded his grasp and reeled away into the waiting arms of a tall toreador. Hyrule gulped his whisky and watched her nestle into the arms of her partner and begin with him a sinuous, suggestive dance. The whisky had begun its warming effect, and he laughed. This was the land of the Lotus Eaters, the sanctuary of the escapists, the haven of all who wished to cast off their shell of inhibition and become the thing they dreamed themselves to be. Here one could be among his own kind, an actor upon a gay stage, a gaudy butterfly metamorphosed from the slug, a knight of old. The Persian dancing girl was probably the wife of a boorish oaf whose idea of romance was spending an evening telling his wife how he came to be a successful bank president. But she had found her means of escape. Perhaps she had pleaded a sick headache and retired to her room, and there upon the bed now reposed her shell of reality, while her inner self, the shadowy one, completely materialized, became an exotic thing from the east in this never-never land. The man, the toreador, had probably closeted himself within his library with a set of account books and had left strict orders not to be disturbed until he had finished with them. Both would have terrific hangovers in the morning, but that, of course, would be fully compensated for by the memories of the evening. Hyrule chuckled. The situation struck him as being funny. The shadowy self got drunk and had a good time, and the outer husk suffered the hangover in the morning. Strange. Strange how a device such as a teleporter suit could cause the shadow of each bodily cell to leave the body, materialize, and become a reality in its own right. And yet... He looked at the heel of his left hand. There was a long irregular scar there. It was a result of a cut he had received nearly 3 weeks ago, when he had fallen over this very table and had rammed his hand into a sliver of broken champagne glass. Later that evening, upon re-teleporting back home, the pain of the cut had remained in his hand, but there was no sign of the cut itself on the hand of his outer self. The scar was peculiar to the shadowy body only. There was something about the shadowy body that carried the hurts to the outer body, but not the scars. Sudden laughter broke out near him, and he turned quickly in that direction. A group of gaily costumed revellers was standing in a semicircle about a small mound of clothing upon the floor. It was the costume of the toreador. Hyrule laughed too. It had happened many times before. A costume suddenly left empty as its owner, due to a threat of discovery at home, had had to press the switch in haste to bring his shadowy self and complete consciousness back to his outer self in a hurry. A waiter picked up the clothing. He would put it safely away so that the owner could claim it upon his next visit to the club. Another waiter placed a fresh bottle of whisky on the table before Hyrule, and Hyrule paid him for it. The whisky, reaching his head now in surges of warm cheerfulness, was filling him with abandonment, courage, and a desire for merriment. He pushed himself up from the table, joined the merry throng, threw his arm about the Persian dancer, drew her close. They began dancing slowly to the throbbing rhythm, dancing and holding on to each other tightly. Hyrule could feel her hot breath through her veil upon his neck, adding to the headiness of the liquor. A feeling of depression and inferiority flowed suddenly from him. Once again he was the all-conquering male. His arm trembled as it drew her still closer to him, and he began dancing directly and purposefully toward the shadows of a clump of artificial palms near one corner of the room. There was an exit to the garden behind the palms. Halfway there, they passed a secluded booth from which protruded a long leg clad in black mesh stocking. Hyrule paused as he recognized that part of the costume. It was she, the girl, the one he had met so briefly the night before. His arm slid away from the Persian dancer, took hold of the mesh-clad leg, and pulled. A female form followed the leg from the booth and fell into his arms. He held her tightly, kissed her white neck, let her perfume send his thoughts reeling. "Been looking for me, honey?" she whispered, her voice deep and throaty. "You know it." He began whisking her away towards the palms. The Persian girl was pulled into the booth. Yes, she was wearing the same costume she had worn the night before, that of a can-can dancer of the 90s. The mesh hose that encased her shapely leg were held up by flowered supporters in such a manner as to leave 4 inches of white leg exposed between hose top and lacy panties. Her skirt, frilled to suggest innumerable petticoats, fell away at each hip, leaving the front open to expose the full length of legs. She wore a wig of platinum hair encrusted with jewels that sparkled in the lights. Her jewel-studded mask was as white as her hair and covered the upper half of her face, except for the large almond slits for her eyes. A white purse, jewel-crusted, dangled from one arm. He stopped once before reaching the palms, drew her closer, kissed her long and ardently. Then he began pulling her on again. She drew back when they reached the shelter of the fronds. "Champagne first," she whispered huskily into his ear. His heart sank. He had very little money left, while it might buy a cheap brand. She sipped her champagne slowly and provocatively across the table from him. Her eyes sparkled behind the almond slits of her mask, caught the colour changes, and cast them back. She was wearing contact lenses of a garish green. He wished she would hurry with her drink. He had horrible visions of his wife at home taking off her telovis and coming to his chair. He would then have to press the switch that would jerk his shadowy self back along its invisible connecting cord, jerk him back, and leave but a small mound of clothes upon the chair at the table. Deep depression laid hold of him. He would not be able to see her after tonight until he received his monthly dole 2 weeks hence. She wouldn't wait that long. Someone else would have her. Unless... Yes. He knew now that he was going to kill his wife as soon as the opportunity presented itself. It would be a simple matter. With the aid of the teleporter suit, he could establish an ironclad alibi. He took a long drink of whiskey and looked at the dancers about him. Sight of their gay costumes heightened his depression. He was wearing a cheap suit of satin, all he could afford. But some day soon he would show them. Sometime soon he would be dressed as gaily. "Something troubling you, honey?" His gaze shot back to her, and she blurred slightly before his eyes. "No, nothing at all." He summoned a sickly smile and clutched her hand in his. "Come on, let's dance." He drew her from the chair and into his arms. She melted toward him as if desiring to become a part of him. A tremor of excitement surged through him and threatened to turn his knees into quivering jelly. He could not make his feet conform to the flooding rhythm of the music. He half stumbled, half pushed her along past the booths. In the shelter of the palms he drew her savagely to him. Let's go outside." His voice was little more than a croak. "But, honey," she pushed herself away, her low voice maddening him. "Don't you have a private room? A girl doesn't like to be taken outside." Her words bit into his brain like the blade of a hot knife. No, he didn't have a private room at the club like the others. A private room for his teleporter receiver. A private room where he could take a willing guest. No, he couldn't afford it. No, no, no! His lot was a cheap suit of satin, cheap whiskey, cheap champagne, a cheap shack by the river. An inarticulate cry escaped his twisted lips. He clutched her roughly to him and dragged her through the door and into the moonlight, whiskey and anger lending him brutal strength. He pulled her through the deserted garden. All the others had private rooms. He pulled her to the far end, behind a clump of squatty firs. His hands clawed at her. He tried to smother her mouth with kisses. She eluded him deftly. "But, honey!" Her voice had gone deeper into her throat. "I just want to be sure about things. If you can't afford one of the private rooms, if you can't afford to show me a good time, if you can't come here real often." The whiskey pounded and throbbed at his brain like blows from an unseen club. His ego curled and twisted within him like a headless serpent. "I'll have money," he shouted, struggling to hold her. "I'll have plenty of money after tonight." "Then we'll wait," she said. "We'll wait until tomorrow night." "No," he screamed. "You don't believe me. You're like the others. You think I'm no good, but I'll show you. I'll show all of you." She had gone coldly rigid in his arms, unyielding. Madness added to the pounding in his brain. Tears welled into his eyes. "I'll show you. I'll kill her. Then I'll have money." The hands clutching her shoulders shook her drunkenly. "You wait here. I'll go home and kill her now. Then I'll be back." "Silly boy!" Her low laughter rang hollowly in his ears. "And just who is it you're going to kill?" "My wife!" he cried. "My wife! I'll—" A sudden sobering thought struck him. He was talking too much. And he wasn't making sense. He shouldn't be telling her this. Anyway, he couldn't get the money tonight even if he did kill his wife. "And so you're going to kill your wife?" He blinked the tears from his eyes. His chest was heaving, his heart pounding. He looked at her shimmering form. "Yes," he whispered. Her eyes glinted strangely in the light of the moon. Her handbag glinted as she opened it, and something she took from it glittered coldly in her hand. "Fool!" The first shot tore squarely through his heart, and while he stood staring at her, mouth agape, a second shot burned its way through his bewildered brain. Mrs. Herbert Hyrule removed the televis from his head and laid it carefully aside. She uncoiled her long legs from beneath her, walked to her husband's chair, and stood for a long moment looking down at him, her lips drawn back in contempt. Then she bent over him and reached down his thigh until her fingers contacted the small switch. Seconds later, a slight tremor shook Hyrule's body. His eyes snapped open, air escaped his lungs, his lower jaw sagged inanely, and his head lolled to one side. She stood a moment longer, watching his eyes become glazed and sightless. Then she walked to the telephone. "Police," she said. "This is Mrs. Herbert Hyrule. Something horrible has happened to my husband. Please come over immediately. Bring a doctor." She hung up, went to her bathroom, stripped off her clothing, and slid carefully out of her teleporter suit. This she folded neatly and tucked away into the false back of the medicine cabinet. She found a fresh pair of blue plastifer pajamas and got into them. She was just arriving back into the living room, tying the cord of her dressing gown about her slim waist, when she heard the sound of the police siren out front.
The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story.
Shatter the Wall by Sydney Van Scyoc. Originally published in Galaxy magazine, February 1962. Narrated by Tom Trussel. There he stood, Bass McDowell, life-size on the wall. She made herself look at the hateful, broad-shouldered image with the deliberately penetrating black eyes. She made herself watch his boy image bend over Kippy's slender girl image, made herself listen to his mellow voice gasp, "Kippy, sweet bug." Savagely she thrust upward on the ebony lever. Bass McDowell, wall idle, and Kippy lurched and disappeared. Lights glowed from fixtures recessed into the building, illuminating the long windowless walled room. Catherine, whose hair was a snug dark Kippy cap, leaped from the wall seat. "Don't turn it off now. Couldn't you even tell Mother? He's going to kiss her. Turn it back on this minute." Amanda stationed herself before the lever, shaking her head. "Not until I've spoken to you," she said. "Catherine, I don't think you realize yet what it means, but you're the youngest person, the very youngest, living in this city." "Quit calling me that. Everyone has to call me Kippy." She cocked her dark head, Kippy-like. The red mark caused by the constant prodding of her index finger against her cheek glared. "Bass loves Kippy. He called her Sweetie Bug." "I refuse to call you Kippy." She folded her arms. "I don't want to discuss your name again, Catherine." "It will be Kippy." She squirmed into a Kippy-like position. "Soon as I'm 21, I'll change it. You wait." "Perhaps you will, Catherine, but I'll never call you Kippy." "Oh, quit being silly and turn it on. You might kiss her again." She focused her blue eyes upon the wall. "Turn it on." "Catherine, I want to talk to you, and I intend to do so without Bass McDowell staring over my shoulder." She sat down beside her daughter. "Now, Catherine, you're 19 years old, and you're certainly attractive by any—" "I don't have dimples like Kippy does." Remembering, she poked her finger back into her cheek. "I'm not talking about Kippy." She stared at the finger sunk into her daughter's cheek, wondering how many times she had explained that it wouldn't cause a dimple. "I want you to get married, Catherine." "I've told you 1,000,000 times I won't. You're always after me," she wailed. "Bass won't ever marry anyone, not even Kippy, and she's got dimples. Bass says—" "Bass McDowell is not a real person. He's only an actor." "He's the realest thing in the world, but he won't marry me, so you'd better forget it." She stepped to turn the wall on again. Instantly the ashtray was in Amanda's hand, the massive glass tray Dell had given her. She hurled it at the wall, which shattered with a brittle explosive splintering. Catherine jumped back, wailing, "I hate you!" Frantically she manipulated the lever and twisted the ebony dials. "Bass, come back! Bass!" Amanda patted the wall seat. "Sit down, Catherine." Finally the girl sat down, sullenly rubbing her eyes with her fists. "Catherine, have you noticed that we never see infants on the wall? We never see small children either, because, Catherine, you're the youngest person in this city. The week after you were born, the city hospital's obstetrical ward closed permanently." Catherine sobbed convulsively. "Who needs babies? I want Bass." "The human race needs babies. Catherine, you sit so complacently in front of your wall and pretend there isn't a world. There won't be unless you wake up." "Don't be silly." "I'm not. Catherine, you may be the youngest person in the world for all I know. 40 or 50 years from now, this planet will be cluttered with blank walls. There will be no one to watch them." "Well, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not different, like you." "Catherine, marry, have children, persuade your friends at the office." She laughed shrilly, rocking back against the wall seat. "Friends! They hate me, every one of them, and I hate them. Even if Bass did marry me, they'd only take him away." Amanda clutched her fists. "I don't want you to marry Bass. You must find some nice boy your own age." "Oh, Mother, you want me to marry some stupid, ugly boy? You can't make me." "Catherine, he needn't be dull. There are hundreds of boys, each interesting in—" Hearing a sound, she looked up to see Dell, thin and red-headed, standing in the doorway staring at the shattered wall. Catherine jumped up. "Mother broke it. She threw that big green ashtray and broke it all to pieces." Dell looked questioningly at Amanda. "Honey, why'd you do that?" "She's jealous of Bass." "Now isn't Bass pretty young for you, honey?" He stooped to remove the ashtray from inside the shattered wall. "Now how can I watch Alice this evening? She promised me a special dance in that red dress she was showing me last night." "Showing you?" She sprang up. "She showed it to every man in the country, Dell." He frowned. "Well, I'll call replacements. I'll have a new wall in before Alice comes. And I'll smash it too. I'll smash every replacement you can buy." "Now, Amanda," he regarded her mildly, "you're not jealous of Alice? Honey, if you'd watched Lester, you shouldn't care about Alice and me." She took the intact ashtray from him. "I'm not jealous of Alice, and I haven't been for 20 years. But, Dell, do you realize Catherine was the last child born in this city?" The girl's voice was harsh. "She wants me to marry some stupid, ugly boy, and I won't do it. I love Bass." Dell's pale eyes were rebuking. "Amanda, how can you expect Kippy to do that?" She stepped back. "Kippy," she said harshly. "Dell, that girl standing there is Catherine, our daughter, not Kippy." "Don't let such things upset you, baby. I'll go call replacements, and we'll all sit down together when Alice and Lester come." He turned. She seized his arm. "I will not watch Lester," she said. "I will not sit and stare at that big grey-haired ape and pretend I'm in love with him." Dell frowned. "You don't really think he looks like an ape, do you, baby? I was thinking of changing my name to Lester." Catherine leapt to hug him. "Oh, Daddy, it'll be so wonderful. Lester, Lester, Lester. If we had an Alice and a bass, we'd be almost like a real family." She stared at them. "I'd hoped to put you in a favourable frame of mind for this, Catherine," she said. "You'll remember that 3 years ago the Watsons next door had wall failure and couldn't get service until morning. I invited them to watch our wall." Dell nodded. "Haven't seen them in a while, now that I think of it." "You haven't. But tonight Mrs. Watson is lending me her son Gerald. He's coming at 7. "Mother!" Catherine cried, releasing Dell. "How terrible! Gerald! What a stupid name! I love Bass, and you can't take him away from me." "That wasn't very nice, was it, Amanda?" "It's done," she said. "He's 22, and I want you to talk to him, Catherine." Catherine scowled. "And I've arranged for you to go over to their house to watch Alice if you must, Dell." Dell forgot he was indignant. "Well, Kippy, maybe this one time you can do as your mother wants," he said. "Surely Bass won't mind if you miss him this once. He's an understanding sort of chap." Catherine thought for a moment, scowling. "All right, I'll do it. If you call me Kippy, Mother." Amanda studied her. "All right, Kippy," she said finally. After agreeing reluctantly not to call replacements until Gerald had come and gone, Kippy wriggled into a Kippy-like position and poked her finger deep into her cheek again. Gerald, who arrived promptly at 7, wore his light hair combed into a bass-like curl low over his forehead. He speared Amanda with a penetrating stare, making her shiver as she led him to the wall room. Kippy sulked angrily on the wall seat. Amanda introduced them, and they looked at each other, their glances revealing no interest. "You're trying to comb your hair like Bass," Kippy accused. Gerald grinned. "Sure thing, sweetie bug." "Then you should dye it. It's the wrong colour. Bass doesn't have blonde hair. And why is your name still Gerald? Don't you ever want to be Bass?" Gerald looked slapped. "I tried. Honest, I really did. But you know there's a limit, and the man at the bureau said there was too many Basses already." His face brightened. "But my parents call me Bass all the time." "Oh." Gerald shuffled his feet. Gingerly he sat down. Did you see them last night?" he asked. "Of course. I always see them, except when my mother does something stupid." Quickly Amanda excused herself and went to the food centre. She leaned against the counter, trying to overhear their conversation. They spoke in broken murmurs momentarily, then were silent. Kippy cleared her throat irritably. Nice weather," Gerald said loudly. "I haven't been out." They were silent again. She tried to make her fingers stop picking at a spot on the counter's surface. Suddenly Kippy emerged hurriedly from the wall room, looking put upon. "Where are you going?" Amanda demanded. "He can't talk like Bass, even when he tries, and his hair's the wrong colour, and he has blue eyes." "But, Catherine, Kippy, those are external characteristics. You can't judge a person by the colour of his hair and his eyes. You must get acquainted with him." "I won't do it. I don't love him. I love Bass." She cocked her head, Kippy-like. "And besides, he loves the real Kippy, and I'll never have Dimples. I'm going to call replacements." Amanda seized her arm. "Call them, and I'll break the new wall too. I'll break every wall you bring into this house. Don't you understand what's happening? Quit being stupid. I'll break every wall you have installed. And every time you do it, I'll order a new one." She broke loose and ran to the communicator. She had to do something. She wondered briefly, must I do something? It could only be the survival instinct driving her. Perhaps, she thought wryly, she was the only person who still possessed that particular instinct. She could never break every wall in the world, no matter how she tried. She picked up the magazine Kippy had thrown down that morning. Running her finger over the cover, She poked it through Bass's penetrated eye. She poked Kippy in the nose. She flipped the magazine open and went through it, mutilating the pages. "There's a hole in your head, Lester. One less eye for you, Alice. Poor little Kippy, I tore your chin, right through the dimple. Will Bass love you now, Kippy?" "Goodbye, Bass." She crumpled him into a ball and threw him at the sink. On the next page was a print of a restaurant. She read the caption. "For 2 hours each evening, while film sequences are shown to the home audience, the stars retire to Anatola's for sandwiches, drinks, and shop talk." She tried to stop her thoughts as they went to the sleeping alcove and the old gun in the top shelf of the built-ins. Dell hadn't bothered to unload it since he'd cleaned it last. She dropped the magazine and went to the top shelf of the built-ins. The gun was there. It didn't take her long to drive downtown. There were no other cars on the streets, and the current to the traffic lights had been cut 3 years before. She passed only a prowling squad car, and the 2 police stared at her curiously. She parked a block from Anatola's. Leaving the car, she slung her purse, heavy with the gun, over her arm. Briskly she walked down the deserted street. Antola, standing behind the bar, was tall, thin, and red-headed. He stared at her incredulously, wiping his hands repeatedly on his long white apron. She went past the bar to a small table. Antola continued to wipe his hands, as if they would not quite come dry. "You want something?" "Yes. Bring me a bacon and tomato sandwich and milk." "Don't have bacon and tomato." "Kippy. She likes tuna. Base, Hamburg. Lester and Alice, they both take grilled cheese. Which do you want?" "Bring me tuna and milk." "Kippy, she says milk don't go with tuna. Makes a big blob inside." "I said tuna and milk." "Okay, if you want a blob inside. Kippy don't." He ambled away. Not knowing how long she might have to wait, she nibbled at her sandwich. Soon she heard voices approaching the restaurant. She snaked her hand towards the purse, opened it, and clutched the gun. Alice entered first, her hair a disciplined halo of red gold, her eyes vivid green. She was quarrelling with Bass, who cheerfully ignored her, his penetrating eyes staring greedily at the bottles behind the bar. Small, precocious-seeming Kippy followed, her dark hair ruffled by the wind. She stared lovingly up into Lester's eyes. When the door had closed behind them, Amanda stood and raised the gun. They hadn't noticed her. They'd been too anxious to mount the bar stools. Ducks in a shooting gallery, she thought. Alice was sitting nearer her, combing her hair with her fingers. Holding the gun out before her with both hands, Amanda aimed it at Alice's hair. She pulled the trigger. At the sound, they all tried to duck, except Alice, who folded quietly to the floor. Amanda aimed again, and this time Lester crumpled. Ducks in a shooting gallery, she thought. See if you can make that big drake Bass fall off his stool. Bass fell. Kippy screamed, banishing her dimples, and fell beside him. Antola had disappeared. It didn't matter. She returned the gun to her purse. She hadn't decided what to do next. Suddenly feeling hungry, she sat down to finish her sandwich. When she was through, she rose, slung her purse over her arm again, and stepped past the 4 bodies. They hardly seemed real, lying in their separate pools of crimson. The 2 policemen came in, staring at her again. "Catch her!" Antola cried from beneath the bar. "She done it! She killed them all! Poor little Kippy!" The florid policeman locked his hand about her wrist, while the other cried for Antola to come out. Her wrists were quickly handcuffed, and the florid policeman escorted her to the police car. He shoved her into the back seat. She didn't move, didn't think. The world seemed frozen, It didn't begin to thaw again until the second squad car and the ambulances arrived. They came slowly, without sirens or flashing lights. She wondered why they came so casually. The florid policeman returned to the car. "All dead," he said. "Even poor little Kippy." Silently they drove the deserted streets. She looked out at the buildings, knowing the people inside them soon would be shocked by the news of the Stars' death. When they reached police headquarters, she had to run to keep up with the florid policeman as he pulled her up the stone steps. They walked endless corridors, grey and gloomy, until they emerged into a small, dim room. A man in a tweed coat, who smoked a pipe and spoke suavely, stepped from the group of men in street clothes. "Did you kill them?" he asked. "Don't be afraid to tell me. I only want to know if you killed them." She nodded. "Certainly, I did it." He took her purse from the uniformed policeman and removed the gun. "But why? Tell me. Were you jealous of Alice, perhaps?" His pipe jumped as he smiled confidentially. "Certainly not," she said. "I did it to save the human race from suicide." The men smiled, amused. "Lock her up until we decide." The man in tweed instructed the florid policeman. He gave her the purse, minus the gun. A bony, disapproving matron led her to a cell and locked her into it. Amanda requested pencil and paper. The matron frowned, but brought them. Placing the paper against her purse, she began composing a statement to the press, making clear her motives. The filmed sequence still played on the small wall opposite her cell. She glanced up occasionally at the faces and smiled. She had almost completed the statement when the filmed sequence ended. The small, oily MC appeared upon the wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. She waited expectantly for the death announcement. "Our stars!" He flung out his arms dramatically. And the 4 stars pranced smiling across the wall. Kippy, Bass, Alice, and Lester. Amanda jumped to the bars. It was not a film. "Matron!" she screamed. "Matron!" Frantically she stared at the 4 actors whom she had murdered and who were alive and smiling. "Matron!" The bony matron unlocked the cell. "Come with me." "Matron, I killed them. I shot them." "Come with me." The matron led her into a small, dim room. The tweedy man smiled confidentially around his pipe. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Davis?" "But I murdered them. You have to keep me here." She tried to catch the lapels of his suit. He smiled again. "Who did you murder, Mrs. Davis?" "All of them. You know I did it. I shot them and they were all dead. He said so, the policeman." Her hands shook. "Look over there." He pointed to a small wall. "They're alive and performing, aren't they, Mrs. Davis?" She looked at the wall. Alice and Lester were planting a small rose bush together. "You see, occasionally women do suffer from delusions like yours," he said. "But now that you're recovered, I'll drive you home. After a quiet night, you'll forget all this." "They aren't delusions," she insisted. "I did it with my husband's gun. I waited until they closed the door, then I aimed. You know I did it." "Yes, certainly," he said, leading her to the door. "Now come along home, Mrs. Davis." She continued to protest, but he pulled her through the corridors and down the steps to a waiting car. He nudged her into the front seat. They passed darkened buildings. She saw the neon sign atop the Herald offices ahead. If no one knew she'd killed them, no one would awaken. No one would live again. The world would end after all. She opened the door and jumped from the moving car. Stumbling, she ran toward the Herald offices. She stumbled into the building and began seeking through its bright corridors. Stopping to stare at each office door, she finally found the one labelled Editorial Mr. Gray. She pushed into the office. The little man behind the desk wore horn-rimmed glasses and smoked a pipe that was a copy of Lester's. He smiled paternally. "Yes, dear?" "I killed them. They're all dead." Realizing excitement did nothing to make her words more believable, she forced herself to be calm. Editor Gray wore his grey hair combed straight back, Lester-like. He stood, putting one hand into his trouser pocket, as Lester always did. "Who did you kill?" he asked quietly. "Calm down, dear. Tell me who you killed." "Lester and all the rest. You have to print it. I shot them. They're dead. Print it in your paper." He crossed the room to his wall. Bass and Kippy were rolling pie dough together, one on either end of the rolling pin. "I'm afraid you're imagining these things, my dear." He sucked his pipe, looked lovingly at Kippy. "I could love that child, but of course Alice would be jealous." She backed away from him into the arms of the Tweedy man who had come into the office. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir," he said. "This poor woman is suffering from delusions. I was driving her home when she escaped me." "That's all right," Editor Gray said mildly. "Perhaps she needs professional help. Have you considered that, my dear?" But Amanda was staring at Bess. She stared at his penetrating eyes, his broad shoulders, at the curl of hair combed low over his forehead. The curl was well left, not right. The Tweedy man took her arm, guided her from building, and nudged her into the car. Do they curl a dead actor's hair differently, she wondered. She had killed them. Why weren't they dead? When they reached her house, it was completely dark. Either Dell and Kippy had gone to bed, or the wall had been replaced and was playing. "I'm sorry I had to bring you away so abruptly," the Tweedy man said. "We can't afford to have the press print unfavourable reports about the force, you understand." He fingered his pipe. "Now, Mrs. Davis, get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow you'll realize it all was a bad dream. You wouldn't kill the stars." Woodenly, she walked up the front walk. Hearing Bass's mellow voice from the wall room, she knew Kippy and Dell were up. She entered the room. Kippy sat curled on the wall seat. Amanda stared at the handsome face on the wall. Bass McDowell, ball idol. Why wasn't he dead? His curl was still curled wrong. She looked more closely at his face as he leaned toward Kippy, gasping, "Sweetie bug." There was a small scar beneath his left eye. The tiniest, most insignificant scar, but it had never been there before. "Poor Bass, he looks so tired," the Kippy on the wall seat said. "See how his face looks thinner when he's tired. I wonder if she notices it." Dell said, "After all, Bass has worked hard today, Kippy." Bass's face was indeed thinner. Thinner face, small scar that hadn't been there before, curl that curled wrong. What did it mean? Suddenly she realized the image on the wall wasn't Bass. She corrected herself. He was a different Bass. He wasn't the one she had shot, but his almost identical double. She stared at her daughter, who looked more like Kippy each time she assumed another of her characteristics or poses. There were hundreds of young people wanting to be Bass or Kippy, hundreds of young men combing their hair the way Bass did, smiling as he did, learning to use their eyes as he did. And if the time should come when a new Bass was needed, there he was, hundreds of him. She frowned. Undoubtedly they had several doubles waiting conveniently nearby to perform if something should happen to one of the stars. She felt a choking in her throat. It would be as impossible to kill all the Basses and Kippys as it would be to break every wall in the world. There was no way to get rid of them, no way to make people listen to what was happening, no way to prevent humanity from watching itself to extinction. As they grew older, she guessed, the actors would grow older too. Gradually, Bas would be 30, then 35, and Lester and the others would age too. But no one would notice. Everyone would be aging at the same rate. But someday, someone would notice. Someday all the Lesters would die, and there would be no more Lester to smile at Alice and look thoughtful. And people would look around and see that her daughter, Catherine, was the youngest person in the world. But by then, even Catherine would be past the childbearing age. Stunned, she sat down beside Dell. He squeezed her hand. She looked up at the wall into Bas's penetrating dark eyes. His eyes were so deep, she thought. His hands were strong, and his face was intelligent. How could she ever have hated him? "Where have you been, baby?" Dell asked. She shook her head irritably. "Be quiet," she said. "Can't you see he's going to kiss her?" Perhaps she should change her name to Alice. Then they'd have Kippy, Alice, and Lester. All they needed was a Bas, and they would be almost like a real family. It would be so easy to forget this way, looking deep into Bas's dark eyes.
The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story.
Parking Unlimited by Noel M. Loomis, originally published in Future combined with Science Fiction Stories, made in June 1950. Narrated by Tom Trussel. I could have taken that $300 and gone to school for a year, by washing dishes 2 hours a night. I had worked for that money too. Shocking wheat for 12 hours a day in the August sun is no vacation. But Slim Coleman convinced me that we could run that 300 into enough to take us both for 4 years. I hadn't even had time to get a haircut, and I did want a haircut. Now it was pretty shaggy. But Slim, diplomat that he is, didn't even seem to notice my hair. "I've got a real deal," he says, and his deep eyes were shining with enthusiasm. "Have you got any money?" "Some," I said cautiously. "It takes 300. Have you got that much?" I had intended to say no, but Slim has a way of fixing his deep, somber eyes on you that gives ineffable dignity even to a touch. "Okay," I said hopelessly. "What's the bite?" "Well, you see, it's like this." We went into a drugstore and ordered Cokes, and Slim characteristically insisted on paying for them when he probably couldn't have bought a package of cigarettes. I let him pay too. I had $301, and I had no intention of parting with a nickel of it, except $1 for a haircut. I was using the brain finder, and I ran across the owner of this unused garage in the Loop. His name is Richard Le Bombard, and he's got a lot of parking lots through the Loop. And you know what he's doing? I saw the waitress stare at me. I swallowed and tried to listen to Slim. No. Slim was staring at the waitress. He loads them up with used cars every day, so those who are hunting a parking place can't get in, he said absently. You know what he wants? Well, no. I never could figure those things, but Slim could see the angles a mile away. He was always good at that. He's made an application for a permit to build a parking ramp that will cover a solid block down in the middle of the Loop. Now, if he can build a place to park 8,000 or 10,000 cars, naturally, that one spot is going to be the best business spot in the city. And Richard Le Bombard holds leases or options on half the store space around that block. He stands to make millions. Where does my 300 come in? Slim ignored the acidulousness in my voice. Well, as I say, I followed him with a brain finder and found him holding hands with the mayor's wife at the skating rink. And the next day I persuaded him to give me an option to lease this building on the edge of the Loop. You mean you blackmailed him? That's a harsh word. I prefer persuaded myself. After all, he wouldn't want something like that to come up just when he's finagling for that permit, would he? Anyway, I paid $5 for the option. That's unusual. You got some of your own money in this deal. Like a gentleman, Slim ignored that thrust. Tomorrow's the 1st. I've got to raise $250 for a month's rent. We'll need $50 more for deposits on light, heat, and power. We'll make $1 million within a month. We split 50-50. How'd you make the $1 million? Slim looked around. Nobody was near. He leaned close and whispered. This is the invention of the century. We can solve the parking problem of the entire city. You know how it is. You can't even get into a parking lot after 10 a.m. Lots of businesses are threatening to put branches out in the suburbs. Yes? The parking problem must be solved if the city is to survive, Slim said dramatically. Okay, but how can you make any more out of an old building than anybody else? He whispered again. I can create a magnetic field that will slow electrons down to almost zero velocity. A car will shrink to about 4 inches long. He stared at me intently. Do you see what that will mean? I sighed. I'm afraid I do. If it works, you can pack 1 million cars in a space that ordinary would hold about 1,000. I tried to stop my enthusiasm, but it was too late. The idea was taking hold. And that garage is right across the street from Newton's, the biggest department store in the city. The parking problem was intensified last week when they abolished parking on the street so the afternoon traffic could get through. Boy, this is the spot for us, Slim said. Will it take all of $300? I asked Slim. He nodded gravely. Every cent, and then it will be a shoestring. Wouldn't $299 be enough? No, said Slim. He looked back at me. It had always been that way. He never compromised with my money. I shuddered when I saw my hair in the mirror as we left, but I knew I'd better keep the $1 for cigarettes. We paid the first month's rent. I put up the deposits, and Slim brought a bunch of wire and stuff from his basement, and we worked till 1 o'clock winding gadgets and building a regular stall to run a car into. This garage had a ramp going to the basement floor, and we decided to use that floor. Also, there was an old freight elevator up to the 2nd and 3rd floors, and we could park a few of them on the main floor and send a few upstairs when we had time, because of course we didn't want the secret to get out. Slim tried the squeezer-upper when he got it finished. He set a couple of old sawhorses inside and turned on the juice. It was uncanny to see those things shrink. You could even hear the legs scrape on the concrete floor as they pulled together. In just about 3 seconds, the sawhorses were 1 inch high. Then Slim reversed the current, and they expanded to normal size again. All this in about 1 breath. But look, I said, suddenly stricken with a horrible thought. What if you don't get a car back exactly the size it was at first? Then new tires wouldn't fit, and new parts wouldn't fit. Oh my goodness! I was abruptly overwhelmed with the enormity of such damage. That's all taken care of, he assured me. The electrons in any given object seem to have a tendency to resume their former orbits if they get a chance. In other words, if I expand a car to almost its normal size and then cut off the power, the electrons will sort of coast into their original orbits and the car will resume its exact former size. Sort of a quantum jump, I suppose. I breathed a deep sigh of relief. Of course, if you go too far, you'll have an oversized car, but you could reduce it again, said Slim. Now in the morning, we'll hang out a parking sign and let them drive onto the main floor. You run the cars into the basement, and we'll have this thing down under the ramp, out of sight. Slim's deep eyes were glowing. We'll make $1 million, he said, rubbing his hands. Well, By the end of the next day, it began to look as if we had, indeed, solved the most urgent problem of modern civilization, the parking problem. We had a sign out that said, "Parking all day, 50 cents. No one turned away. And by the end of the day, we had taken in nearly $500. But it was a man-killer. I handed out claim checks and drove cars to the basement. Slim reduced them and hauled them across the room to a lineup. That was funny, seeing a car shrink to 3 or 4 inches long. It was an irresistible impulse to pick it up, but when you tried, you changed your mind. The cars were practically as heavy in their small size as in their big size, and that made it something of a problem to get them moved around. We had borrowed a toe and heel, a sort of crowbar with rollers on it, and with the reduced friction from the extremely small tires of the cars, it wasn't too hard to move them. But it was still a man-killer to move 1,000 in one day, and move each twice. We took turns at the reducer. I could handle them best by catching them under the front axle, but we decided to make them 6 inches long so it would be easier. The metal in its smaller size seemed as tough as it had been normally, but the parts were pretty small to get hold of with anything strong enough to handle them. Slim solved this problem the second day, when he put a long piece of gas pipe on the heel and toe and shrank it considerably. The second day, too, we had 2 men working upstairs. The third day, we had a gadget made so that we could roll a car's front wheel on it and then pull the car anywhere. That was when we began to get our breath. The other way had been tough. I don't know how Slim stood it at all. If I hadn't worked in the wheat fields all summer, I would have fallen from exhaustion. We had 2 of those gadgets made, and then we tilted the reducing stall a little. We'd block the wheels with a 2x4 after we had a car inside, then reduce it, take out the block, let the car roll onto the gadget and haul it away. We arranged them on the concrete floor in rows about 4 feet apart. When somebody came back to get their car out, we had to pinch bar the car back up on the gadget and wheel it to the stall. The second week, we had 2 stalls, one reducing and one expanding, and Slim was talking of having a new sloping floor put in to help in handling. By that time, we were handling 2,000 cars a day. You can do your own arithmetic. On the last day of the month, Le Bombard came in to collect his next month's rent. He was all eyes, and he said he didn't see how he could do it. "You took in 2,200 cars yesterday, and this building won't hold over 600, he said, his eyes darting all around. "You must have a fast turnover." Slim kidded him. "We put them on the roof," he said, and paid him and pushed him out. I didn't like the look in that man's eyes as he left. "Well," said Slim exuberantly to me, "we're sitting on $30,000. Think you can get through college on that?" "I hope I can take time off to get a haircut," I said fervently. It was embarrassing to have people look at me and suddenly snicker and turn away to hide their faces. The trouble was, we didn't dare turn the reducing over to anybody else, and so we both worked like robots. By the beginning of the second month, we had a moving ramp. The boys upstairs put the car on the ramp. The car came downstairs and went through the reducer, came out on the other side and onto a platform. We had a tow truck that just backed up, reached down a steel platform under the front axle, and walked away. It was funny to see that 2-ton truck hauling a toy car across the floor. Yes, we had a deal. Late at night, after we'd closed up and had time for some coffee, Slim would talk about how we're going to build a chain of parking ramps across the country. "We'll make billions," he said, his deep eyes shining with a faraway fanaticism that only Slim Coleman can exhibit, "and we'll be known as the saviors of civilization. We'll call ourselves Parking Unlimited." Then one night, the building inspector came. We were just resting for a moment, with no cars in sight, when we looked around, and there he stood. It startled us, because absolutely no one was allowed in the basement. "What do you want?" Slim asked, and just then a car appeared on the ramp coming down to the reducer. I'm the building inspector. I'm checking on the weight you're putting on this building. It's an old building, you know." And all the time his eyes were darting everywhere. "Did Le Bombard send you?" asked Slim. The car was halfway down. "Well, not exactly. We're interested in this from the safety angle." A second car's nose showed around the curve. I began to sweat. "Okay," said Slim. "Look us over. We do the parking upstairs." "What you do down here?" The inspector stared at the reducing stall. "That's a newfangled washing apparatus." "What are all these toy cars on the floor down here?" I practically swallowed my tongue. I had known that was coming. But Slim said casually, "Oh, we're making Christmas presents in our spare time." The first car was about to enter the reducing stall. The inspector stared at the 2,000 cars on the basement floor. "They look plenty real." I held my breath. If he should ever try to pick up one of those cars, it would be all over for us. I could just imagine what 2,000 owners would say if they should find out their cars had been reduced to 6 inches. People are not too broad-minded about such things. But Slim had him by the elbow. With a savage shake of his head at me and the reducing stall, he said, "I'll take you up and show you around." They rode the ramp upstairs. Right then, I wanted to lie down and pass out with sheer relief, but the cars were beginning to pile up. I worked like a horse for half an hour, doing double duty. Then Slim came back with a haunting sadness in his eyes and a faraway look that was not encouraging. "We've got to get out of here," he said. "He knows too much. Too many parking lot people are putting on the heat." "You mean he knows how we are packing them in?" "No, but he knows that we are taking in as many as 3,000 cars a day, while half the parking lots in town are begging for customers." I sighed. "When are we leaving?" Slim's eyes were looking far away. "At the end of the week," he said. "We've got enough money in the bank to pay all our bills. We've got a couple thousand in the safe, and we'll take in 3 or 4 more. Tomorrow's Friday. The next day will be Saturday, and we should handle 4,000 cars. We'll blow Saturday night. Then we go to the coast." "Will I have time to get a haircut?" I asked hopefully. "No. Get your haircut in LA," he went on dreamily. "We should have 5,000. We can start up again, and this time we'll start off right so we can run indefinitely without anybody catching on. We've got some capital to work with now." Friday was a good day. Slim only chuckled when I told him there was a man sitting across the street with a pad of paper and a pencil, tallying the cars that came in and those that went out. "We're good for tomorrow," said Slim. "Then they can have it. I got plane reservations for 2 a.m. He didn't say so, but I think he was getting as tight inside as I was. We were close. 30 hours from $5,000. Enough to go through college in good shape. Saturday was a bell ringer. By 6 o'clock in the evening we had parked over 4,000 cars, and they were still coming. The safe was full of 10s and 20s, all nicely wrapped in label, and our 2 suitcases were beside it. Still the money was pouring in. 9 cars a minute, 1 every 7 seconds, $250 an hour. It was better than a mint. The basement floor was beginning to fill up. At 6:30, Slim was bringing a car back to full size and saying to me, "Watch this one. This is the building inspector's car. He's trying to get a clue." At that exact moment, a voice spoke behind us. "I beg your pardon, gentlemen." It was one of those clear, soft voices with little tinkling bells in it. Know what I mean? Slim turned and stared. "Madam," he said, "don't you know the sign says no admittance?" She looked repentant. "I'm sorry." She looked hurt. "I didn't think you gentlemen would mind." She turned as if to go. I saw Slim melting down. I didn't blame him. That girl could have melted tungsten. Yes, I recognized her from her pictures in the society section. The mayor's wife. Slim was apologizing. I beg your pardon, madam. It's quite all right. Your loveliness and radiant beauty just startled us. While Slim was laying it on thick, the building's inspector's car was expanding. Now it became considerably too big for the stall, and split it like a stick of dynamite going off in a shoebox. It split it into 1,000 pieces, then stood there, a passenger car 7 feet tall. The mayor's wife gave a little scream of delight. Slim gave a horrified gasp. I tried to faint. "Oh," she said, "such a big car." Slim moaned. "Please, madam, will you leave us now?" She looked hurt again. "Yes, but will you please put this package in my car?" "I will," said Slim through tight jaws. "But—" "Why, that looks just like the building inspector's car," she said, wide-eyed. "It's his number, too." "Madam," begged Slim, "you're no dummy. Please leave now and let us get on with our work." She walked upstairs dubiously. Slim was studying the enormous car with a hopeless look on his face. Orders for cars to be taken out were pouring down the chute. "What are we going to do now? We can't run that car into the other stall, because it's too big. It will take all night to build another stall, and no doubt the inspector is waiting up there with a squad of cops, hoping something will happen. After all, we're costing La Bombard $1 million. His eyes opened suddenly. "I'll bet he sent the woman down here to spy on us." A car came down the ramp and went into the reducing stall, and Slim automatically said the dial. The telephone rang, and I could hear the voice from where I stood. "The building inspector wants his car." "Coming right up," Slim said. Then he looked at me. I looked at him. "Get that safe open," he jerked out. I dived for it. I was spinning the combination when I heard the voices. The building inspector was riding the ramp down to the basement. Then I heard more voices and saw the bottom half of 2 cops and Richard La Bombard on the freight elevator. Slim hissed to me, "Make it snappy!" I was trying to, but I couldn't get the thing open. $5,000 in that safe, and I couldn't get it. I spun the dial frantically and started over. But now the ramp was filled with people. The cops were getting off the elevator. I jumped up and ran over to where Steve was standing. The building inspector was staring bug-eyed at his huge car. Somebody went around the stall and saw the 6-inch car crawling out. Somebody else took hold of the stall and shook it. "Where's my car? What's going on?" Well, a mob is a funny thing. In about half a minute, there were 800 people in that basement, and all of them tearing apart the reducing stall. Slim and I hesitated no longer. We ran up the stairway and sifted out through the crowd. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Slim said to me, "You think that brakeman will kick us off?" The brakeman came to us, sitting up there in the fresh night breeze on the top of a carload of lettuce going east from California. He looked at me, and then, as if he didn't believe it, he held his lantern up and examined my head all the way round. "Why don't you go back to the farm? This ain't no life for you," he growled. "I am considering that very seriously," I said, with as much dignity as I could. The end. Subscribe for your daily stories or futures past. You know, many of these stories were written in a time where 50 years ago was in the future.